right, everybody, we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for being here today for the next webinar in our biweekly webinar series, Expanding the Battery Catalog. So we've had some pretty exciting updates to this catalog. We want to talk to you about the different batteries and which markets they're available in and when you would use them in certain situations. So let's not waste any time. Let's jump right into the agenda. So again, first, we're going to talk about expanding the battery catalog. We'll touch briefly on, again, the difference between backup versus non-backup. We'll show you how to add and price these batteries into your projects. The last thing we'll talk about is timelines and expectations, how you can set the expectation with your homeowners. And then, like always, we will have a Q&A session that will appear about halfway through this presentation. Start submitting your questions on topic related to things about batteries, and our panel for the Q&A session will answer those at the conclusion of what we talked about here today. So let's talk about the expanding battery catalog and what we have available to us in the field. So Old Reliable here, the Tesla Powerwall 2 offers whole home backup. Again, this is available where the Brightbox product is offered for Sunrun, and it's available in all states where we do batteries for Mosaic and Cache. With the Tesla Powerwall 2, you can use either Solar Edge inverters or Enphase inverters, and there's been a price update for $13,000 for the first battery and $8,500 for each additional battery. Next up, we want to talk to you about the Solar Edge Energy Bank. Now, this has been in the product catalog for a while. The Solar Edge Energy Bank is only pairable with Solar Edge inverters. This is the battery that is used for the Sunrun Shift product for SCE, SDG&E, and PG&E. And we'll do a breakdown again of the Shift product later in the presentation. This is only used for those net billing tariff projects and does not provide whole home backup. The price for this battery is $6,400 per battery, and again, it's used in the Sunrun Shift platform in Sunrun. So we have a couple of Enphase options we need to talk about. The Enphase IQ10. This battery is only available for Sunrun whole home backup in Puerto Rico. Because it's an Enphase battery, it's compatible with Enphase inverters only. And the price point for this product, if you're doing whole home backup in Puerto Rico, is $11,000 for the first battery and $7,000 for each additional battery. So you have those two options that you can use. If you're going with Sunrun, you're going to use the whole home backup for the Enphase IQ10. If it's a Cache project, you can go with the Tesla Powerwall in Puerto Rico. The next item we want to share with you is something we're really excited about, and that is the Enphase IQ5, which is a stackable battery that has a great higher level of output, even more than this Enphase IQ10. So let's talk about it. The Enphase IQ5 can operate in both a whole home and non-backup environment. So let's go over a breakdown of how this works in a whole home environment. So, okay, again, the IQ5P is a smaller battery option that is stackable. When you stack this battery, it has a higher output than even the Tesla Powerwall or its IQ10 counterpart. Now, the IQ5P can be used in whole home backup or as a net billing tariff export option. If you're using this product for a whole home backup, it's available for Everbright where the Everbright Plus product is offered. If you're doing Cache or Mosaic projects, the IQ5 is available in all states where we install batteries. The price point for this stackable option is $8,000 for the first battery and $3,500 for each additional battery. An exciting new whole home option that's going to be a really cool option for homeowners that want to stack a bunch of batteries. So let's talk about how this battery works in a non-backup environment. So the IQ5P is the non-backup option for Everbright where the PowerShift product is offered. So in the state of California, if you're going to be offering a battery as a non-backup option for Everbright projects, you would choose the IQ5P. For Mosaic and Cash projects, the IQ5P will be available as a non-backup offer in the other states where we offer non-backup, which we'll go over in detail on the next slide. Now, the price point for this battery is pretty exciting. For the first battery, it's $3,500, and for each additional battery, it's $2,500 if it's being used in a non-backup capacity. So here is a breakdown where you can use non-battery backup markets. So there's options in Arizona, California, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, Texas, and Utah. So refer to the adder sheet at the bottom. There will be a breakdown. I could sit here and read all of this to you, but for the sake of time, we're not going to go line by line and have me read out these utilities. Refer to the adder sheet so you can locate these non-backup battery markets, and you can add those batteries to your project to save homeowners that are dealing with export rates. So how do you go about adding and pricing these batteries into your projects? So we've recently updated the Lightspeed storage guide. So when you go to Lightspeed and click storage guide, you'll see the Powerwall, the Enphase IQ10, and the 5P. Again, we're not including the SolarEdge Energy Bank in our storage guide because that's the one that you would add if you were doing a Sunrun shift. So the 3 battery options that are available to us in Lightspeed's environment, you can choose to help your homeowner plan which circuits they're going to back up in the event that they add storage to their project. So when you're in Aurora and you're going to add storage to a project, when you've already put in the utility usage and gotten to the system design page and designed the project, there will be a storage page where you can choose the difference between self-consumption or whole home backup, and then choose the battery options that are available to you for those markets. So you can choose either whole home or self-consumption, and then if you choose whole home, it will give you a breakdown of how many batteries you would need based on the design of the system. If you're choosing self-consumption, you'll be given a breakdown of what the bill would be in one of those net billing tariff markets if you had only gone solar, or if you attach the battery, solar plus battery. Okay, so that's a really cool feature in Aurora that you can use to plan out your battery projects. Now in Sunrun, if you're using the Sunrun Shift page, you'll definitely see 3 options: no battery or solar only, partial home backup, or whole home backup. So Sunrun projects have the option to add a battery where states are applicable. You scroll to the bottom and choose which option you want. States that allow batteries for Sunrun projects are Arizona, Florida, Illinois, Connecticut, California, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New Mexico, and Texas. If you're doing Shift in California, we'll break that down in a later slide. So how do you go about adding storage to an Everbright project? When you're on the design page and you've designed the different arrays and you've built the system, if you scroll down past inverters, there's a drop down for storage. And when you click that drop down, you can choose the battery, choose a quantity, and then what the purpose of that battery is for. PV self-consumption, i.e. whole home backup, or you can change that purpose button to a time of use, which is more of our net billing tariff markets. Now, anytime you submit a project through Lightspeed for a storage project, there's 2 types of disclaimers that will be sent out. After you've planned the circuits in the storage guide in the project generator, this backup storage disclaimer will be generated and sent to the homeowner to sign. In our markets where there is a non-backup option, like the net billing tariff, you're going to receive a non-backup storage disclaimer as well. Basically, the point of this form is to make sure that the homeowner is in full understanding that this is a non-backup option, that the batteries being attached to their home do not have any backup capacity. They're only being used for that time of use export rate. So we've been talking about it throughout this presentation with the SolarEdge Energy Bank. How does that Shift product work? So when you're doing smart solar with Shift, we're going to be using that SolarEdge Energy Bank for self-consumption mode. You will choose this option at the system design screen prior to pricing. Again, this is 0 home backup. It will not power the home in the event of an outage. And with the Shift product, you do need to build the cost of these batteries into the EPC. Whereas with whole home backup, there is a line item for whole home and like what you're paying for the battery. In a Shift product, you have to build that into the cost. So what do we mean by that, right? You're going to see in California projects, solar only, not recommended, smart solar with shift, or smart solar with backup, which is the Tesla Powerwall. If you choose shift, it's going to add the SolarEdge batteries to it. And then you need to increase the cost per kilowatt for that project by about 6 to 7 cents per shift battery. So Sunrun has different kWh thresholds depending on the utility. So it will detect which utility you're in, and as the system production increases, it will also increase the batteries. You'll see that on the annual production here. For this utility, it's gone past that threshold of 8,500, so it's automatically added that second battery. So as the rep, you need to build in the cost of 2 batteries into the pricing screen. So again, when we do shift, it doesn't have its own line item for having those batteries built in. So this is an example of a 1 battery SolarEdge added to the shift product. So if you were intending to charge 21 cents per kilowatt hour, that was increased to 27 cents to build in the $6,400 cost of that battery. So you can see when you go with the whole home backup, there's a separate line item for monthly battery cost built into the project itself. So what do we mean by adding it in or building it into the pricing screen? This is an example of if you had 2 shift batteries and you were going to charge 18 cents a kilowatt hour, you would have to up that to about 30 cents or a little bit more to offset the cost of those 2 batteries. So when you're on the pricing screen for Sunrun Shift, you do have to build that into the cost to offset the cost of that adder. Okay, so when we talk about building the cost of that Sunrun Shift battery into the project, we would just want to go over that quick pricing breakdown again about finding your net PPW when you're subtracting the battery cost from the project, okay? So this is that solar math that's really associated with Sunrun projects. So in order to find the gross system price of your Sunrun project, you need to take the EPC from the pricing screen and multiply it by the watts of the system. So for this example, we're doing an EPC of 4.742 times a 5.33 kilowatt system, which is 5,330 watts. The gross system price of that is $25,275. So when we take that gross system price and subtract the adder cost of that shift battery, we get a net system price of $18,875. So now to find your net PPW, you would take that 18,875 and again divide it by the watts of that system, and that will show you what your actual net PPW is for that project. So if you are trying to figure out what your net PPW is for a project while you're building in the cost of the shift battery, this is the math equation you would do to figure that out. So as we wrap this up, again, we started the Q&A about halfway through, so start submitting your battery questions now. We do want to talk about timelines and expectations, some things to remember about battery projects in general. There are additional adderies for battery projects. Make sure that you refer to the adder sheet, these things that can impact your net PPW, like the additional sub panels beyond the 2 that are included, if there's something like an AC line disconnect or massive changes in the scope of work for complicated installs, bollards, if there's a Tesla wall connector added. We always ask that you refer to the adder sheet so you can build some of those costs in if you know they're going to anticipate them in the project. So how are install times impacted by adding storage to a typical panel system? Well, every AHJ is different. Install times and permitting can be impacted by adding batteries to a solar install. Depending on the products chosen, the additional load may require an MPU. Any kind of work that requires additional subcontracting will extend install times. The average project with a battery included on average takes about 77 days to install from time sold. Again, this varies from region to region, some markets averaging as little as 53 days. So when you're setting the expectation for a battery project, it's important to know that typically whole home backup requires at a minimum 2 batteries. The larger the energy profile, the more batteries are needed to power a whole home solution. The first battery has a higher cost because it includes the controller and most of the electrical work costs. So that's why that first battery is typically more, and each additional battery has pretty much minimal labor and you're just dealing with material costs. So inventory at the time of this webinar is not an issue. Batteries are available. Freedom has allocated resources to ensure that battery projects have the materials necessary. And again, install teams require additional training to install storage systems. So when scheduling install, it's important to set the expectation with the homeowner because a specifically trained crew is required to install these types of projects. Okay, so we've reached the end of our presentation. Now it's time to go over some of those Q&A questions, which we will jump to now. Okay, folks, thank you so much for joining us today. We are ready for your questions about the expanded battery catalog. Before we get to that, though, I am going to kick it over to Rob. We do want to explain some of the kilowatt thresholds and some of the things that are associated with automatically adding a second battery and how those operate in the storage guide. So I'm going to share my screen here momentarily, and I'll kick it over to Rob so he can demonstrate the different thresholds. So just one moment.
All right. Morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. I know Mark just went through a tremendous amount of information very, very quickly, so I'm sure we'll have a nice long Q&A here where we kind of get into some of the meatier topics in a little bit greater detail here. One of the things, or I guess a couple of things that I wanted to dive into in a little bit greater depth is more about how the storage guide works and just some considerations around backup batteries. We also have Matt Markham here. So Matt, I might tap you in from time to time or just make sure that everything I'm saying is accurate. Matt is our I think already got introduced, but Matt is our kind of subject matter expert here and extremely technical with how all this stuff works. But I'll try to break it down. This stuff can get pretty complicated, so I'll try to break it down as simply as I can. So the first concept that I want to convey is a little bit more about how the storage guide works and how the logic is set up. You know, a term that Mark used a couple of times throughout the webinar here is whole home. And I just want to put a little asterisk on there and really talk about exactly kind of how this is going to work in real life. So on the left side, what you're looking at there is each of the loads that are selectable within the storage guide. So you select, you know, in Project Generator, you're going to select, yes, I want to add a battery, and then you're going to select your backup mode, or excuse me, your configuration mode is backup, and it's going to prompt the storage guide where you select the loads, and then it tells you how many batteries you're going to need. So this is behind the scenes of how that works, and I think this is important to understand the basics of. So on the left side, you have each of those loads, and then you have an instantaneous demand in watts. So basically what that means is how much power does that appliance need to operate, to run, to start up and continue running. What we're doing here is we're basically balancing how much demand all of the appliances need and how much basically supply, we call it output, how much output the batteries have. All right, now there's kind of two different questions here. Question number one is, does the battery have enough output for each appliance to be able to turn on? So that's question one. Question two is, okay, how many of these things are you going to be running at the same time? Those are a little bit of a different question here. So you can see, for example, this might be kind of small on some of your screens, especially if you're looking here on your phone, but one of the items here you have is the electric range stove oven. So we've assumed that that is 8,500 watts. By the way, all of these things are assumptions. The appliances in real life may vary, but this is kind of an assumed average value for each of these things. So we have an electric range stove and oven. That's 8,500 watts. Most of these batteries, the Tesla, for example, is a 5,000 watt output battery. So if you only have one Tesla, you can't turn that thing on. You can't turn that electric range on. So if you choose, I have an electric range, right away, that's going to prompt a second battery because you need more output than one Tesla battery will supply. An important concept to know is that typically when you're adding multiple batteries, that doubles the output. So if you have two Tesla batteries, you would go from 5,000 watts of output to 10,000 watts of output. All right. So now with two batteries, you'd be able to turn that thing on. All right. So the way we've set this up behind the scenes is that you're going to have a threshold for each additional battery to be added. So for the Tesla, for example, probably should have just hidden the first battery column here because right away, you're obviously going to get a first battery. But for the Tesla, the second battery would be forced when you select loads that equal 5,000 watts of output. So as you go through and you click each of these things, once it adds up to 5,000, you're going to immediately prompt a second battery, right? Because it wants to make sure that you have enough to be able to power each of those things. You'll notice there's a big jump to the third battery, though. That doesn't get prompted until you're over 33,000 watts. And that's because the assumption is you're not necessarily going to be using all of these things at once. And we don't want to say, okay, once you hit 10,000, you have to automatically do a third, because again, in real life, typically people aren't going to be using everything at once when the power goes out. So we're giving a little bit of leeway there, and we're saying, all right, you have all these things, but you're just going to need to manage how you use them when the power goes out. So we give you a little bit more room so that we're not unnecessarily forcing you into a third battery when it's really not necessary. So I just wanted to give a little bit more detail there. Hopefully that makes sense. The last thing on this page that I'll mention is that the Enphase 5P and 10P do have a little bit lower output than the Tesla does. So it's 3840 watts. The real benefit of the 5P over the 10P, though, is that even though it's half as much capacity, so it's 5 kilowatt hours instead of 10 kilowatt hours, you do add additional output when you add a second battery. So in other words, if I add two 5P batteries, my output doubles to 7.68. Whereas if I have one 10T, that should say 10T there, that's our mistake. If we have a 10T battery, the output is still just the 3840. So two 5Ps is better than one 10T is the short answer of the short story of that. So hopefully that graph makes sense. That I think is an important concept. We can certainly dive into questions as you have them. If you could go to the next piece there, Mark. The second slide here that I want to talk about is, and this is a new addition that we will be adding in. If it's not in today, it will be in there within the next couple of days. This is something similar to what Sunrun does. We are going to be forcing second, third, and fourth batteries here based on the production of your system. And so Sunrun does something similar where they say, okay, once you're over 8,500 or 10,000 kilowatt hours, you're going to need a second self-consumption or non-backup battery. We are going to do something similar. We are going to have, and I know there was probably a collective all out there in the crowd because you guys don't like that, and I agree. I think the difference, though, is that Sunrun, they are very, very conservative in how they've done that. We're being less conservative. We're giving quite a bit more leeway than what Sunrun does. So I think this will be less painful. We are trying to balance those scenarios where just really set customer expectations. We're trying to balance situations where you have a system that's going to produce, 20,000 kilowatt hours a year, and you only put one Enphase 5P non-backup battery on there. That's really not enough for that system size, and they're still going to be exporting a lot of production in that scenario. So what we're really trying to do is just put some guardrails, really automate some of the decision making for you guys, and just make it easier for you to know, when do I need a second battery. And so that's what this does. So what you can see here on the Enphase 5P non-backup battery, once you hit 6,500 kilowatt hours of production, that's going to force you into a second battery. Once you hit 13,000 kilowatt hours, that's going to force you into a third battery. And once you hit 19.5, that's going to force you into a fourth battery. Hopefully that makes sense. Again, happy to answer questions. The last piece, and then we'll hand it over to Q&A, that I want to mention is on the 5P backup, we're doing something similar there. Normally, we're only looking at the loads that are selected to determine the battery quantity. But for this one, we are a little bit more concerned about bad expectation setting because it's such a small battery in kilowatt hours. We want to make sure that we're not selling a large system and only putting one 5P battery on there, because realistically, when the power goes out, customers are likely going to be fairly upset that they don't get the backup duration that they thought they were going to get with just one 5P. So we're just doing that for the second battery. We're saying if you're over 6,500 kilowatt hours, separately from what you're choosing to back up, we're going to force a second battery. We're only doing that for the second battery, though. Once you have 10 kilowatt hours of storage, you can leave it there and only there if you have a large system and you're not choosing to back up a lot of loads. So I think that's it. Again, short story here is that your battery quantity on backup is, kind of the quantity is dependent upon what you want to back up. and then the quantity of batteries in the non-backup is based on system production. That is the general takeaway here. Hopefully that makes sense. Mark, we'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Rob. We do appreciate the questions that are coming in. If you have questions that are battery related, we're going to start jumping into those now. So send those into our queue and we will send them over to our panel. We are going to have our first question about, and this is from Craig, and it's kind of similar to some of the stuff that we were just talking about, but just for a reiteration, Craig asked, do you have a formula for estimating battery requirements for whole home backup? Matt, do you want to take that one?
I can kick that one off if you don't mind,
Okay.
Matt, and then hand it off to you if that's cool. Yeah, that goes into everything we were just talking about, I guess. And Matt, you probably can verbalize this better than I can, but it depends on what you want to back up. Again, that's the whole point of what we're just talking about. Whole home can mean many different things to many different people, depending on what is in that home. So the main takeaway here, guys, that I just want to make to you is that you need to use the storage guide. You need to do that discovery with the homeowner and understand exactly what they have and exactly what they want to back up. And really what we're talking about here is the larger appliances. If they have a central AC and they have 2 condensers, that is critically important to know when you're doing that storage guide. That is going to make a big difference on whether you need 1 battery, 2 batteries, 3 batteries, whatever. If they have an EV charger, if they have that electric range that we were talking about, all of that stuff is incredibly important. So the formula is everything we just went over. As long as you're selecting the right loads that the homeowner has inclusively in their house, the storage guide should be pretty darn close. It's not going to be 100%. It's still based on some assumptions. There still could be changes post-sale, but it's going to get you pretty darn close. So as long as you use storage guide correctly, you will be 95% of the way there. Mark, anything? Sorry to steal that from you. Anything you want to add there?
Okay.
Sorry, not Mark. Matt.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were handing it back to Mark. No, I think that's exactly right. We wouldn't want to do a 1-button click for a whole home because we don't know if they have gas appliances or electric appliances. So, filling out the storage guide as completely as possible is going to give you the best guidance.
Okay, thanks, guys. So some of the questions that we have coming in are pretty quick answer ones. So we'll go ahead and approve Scott's question, show it on screen. Is Enphase still only compatible with Enphase inverters? So Enphase to Enphase. Who wants to take that one real quick?
Yes.
Quick answer is yes.
Yes.
Yep. Enphase with Enphase, SolarEdge with SolarEdge. Tesla can be with either.
All right, we got some good questions coming in, so we'll get a few of these approved and shoot them over to our panel. This next question is from Dan, and it's somewhat equipment specific. When would I use a load controller adder to a system? Who can address that?
I'm happy to give that one a shot, and Matt can keep me honest. So a load control. Oh, go ahead, Matt, if you want to take them.
I was going to say, I think currently our only load controller offerings are to meet some utility requirements in Arizona. Rob, correct me if I'm wrong. We are exploring the use of some load control equipment to basically extend the capacity of a battery, where you can do some additional load management and increase the duration, depending on what your the capacity of the battery is. You could potentially extend that, but I don't believe that's a current offering.
Yeah. So to add on to what Matt's saying, so a load controller is typically going to be used when your utility rate plan charges you based on your demand. Typically, it's going to be either your peak demand any given month or your average demand throughout the month. And that's going to be, as Matt mentioned, in utilities like SRP. I think APS may have a demand plan, TEP may have a demand plan. But SRB I think is the big one. So basically, what you're trying to do there is, a load controller shuts off your appliances once you hit a certain, a certain demand or a certain requirement. So if you set it to say 7 kilowatts, for example, you're going to basically set an order of the appliances that you want to shut off. So it would stop the customer from using more than whatever it's set at. So that's typically what a load controller is. A battery can help here because it basically can take some of that load off of you demanding it from the utility. So you can use your battery rather than taking that from the utility. So in certain cases, adding a battery would minimize the need for a load controller because you can manage your load a little bit more effectively with a battery. And kind of deem the load controller necessary.
Thanks, Rob. We got a couple other questions coming in. We do want to say, when you do submit questions, you do not have to submit them multiple times. We will see the first one and we'll approve it for the queue after we assign it to one of our panel members. So we will address all the questions that we get in the chat to the best of our ability. So if we're going to go now to a question from Michelle, and this is more about the continuous power. For the 5P battery, it stores 5 kilowatt hours of power, but how much continuous power does it release at that time?
I can take that one. So the 5P, the 5 represents the capacity. So the capacity is 5 kilowatt hours. The continuous power is what was shown on Rob's graph, the 3840 watts, which is a little bit less than the continuous power output of the Tesla Powerwall, which is 5,000 watts. But as Rob mentioned, when you stack that 3840 for 2 or 3 5P batteries, you can increase that continuous power output as you add additional batteries. So continuous power output 3840 on the 5P, which is also the same as the 10T, but in the smaller capacity at the lower price point.
Thanks, Matt. Our next question is from Michael, and it is the IQ5 available in Aurora and Everbright in California? Do we want to, Rob, I do have a picture of the battery list from the address sheet. If you want me to put that up on screen, I can screen share that. And if it's a better breakdown, is that something we want to do?
Yeah, I think this particular question is asking kind of, do they have the availability to select in each of those systems? I think is what they're asking there. So the CBATS and adder sheet have just been updated. And as soon as we're done with this call, we'll be updating all of our systems to make these options available in Lightspeed, in Aurora, and in Everbright. And then I suppose in Sunrun as well, though Sunrun should already be all set. So they are not right now, but they will be within the next couple of hours, definitely by the end of today. And then, yeah, as Mark mentioned on the adder sheets, it gives a nice breakdown of where each battery is available for which financing and cost of those. So you guys can reference the adder sheet, which is posted as of this point.
Thanks, Rob. So we have a question from Ed, and he's been waiting a couple minutes to get this one answered, so we'll put it up on screen. Can a shift for Sunrun, can a shift system be sold without solar? So I guess getting a shift battery without solar attached to it.
I think we'll just leave that one as a no. I think Mark can tell us technically whether it would be possible. I'm sure it probably could, but we're not doing kind of the arbitrage. So no is the short. I'll just leave it at that. No.
Okay, so our next question is from Stanley. It says, it looks like the 5T is superior to the 10P. So why are we currently offering both of them?
Yeah, we're kind of not. It's the other way around. It's the 5P and the 10T. So the 10T is only being offered in Puerto Rico with Sunrun because they don't allow, Sunrun doesn't have the 5P as an available product yet. So as soon as they do get the 5P, we're going to sunset the 10T. and go with the 5P. The only other scenario that we would use the 10T, and we did note this on the adder sheet, is because in a non-backup environment, this is getting a little bit in the weeds, but in a non-backup environment, 2 5Ps and 1 10T are the same. There's really no difference. The output doesn't matter in that scenario. So there may be some scenarios where we opt to swap 2 5Ps for 1 10T. Again, only a non-backup. That would just be kind of a behind-the-scenes change from the customer standpoint. They're getting 10 kilowatt hours either way, and there literally is no difference. So that's the only scenario we, outside of Puerto Rico, we'd use the 10T.
Thanks, Rob. Our next question is regarding batteries from regarding all about batteries, but the warranty for each battery. Can we provide some information about the current battery warranties?
Can you take that?
Yeah, I was actually gonna scramble around behind the scenes. Haven't had a chance, so maybe we can
come back to it
put together a quick graphic and we can share that out.
I looked it up. It was 10 years for the 10T, 15 years for the 5P, and 10 years for the Powerwall.
Thanks, Max.
Appreciate that, Max. Our next question is from Carlos, and it is there a way to submit hourly data to get a more accurate assessment of nighttime self-consumption? Pretty specific question. Who wants that one?
I assume you're asking,
yeah.
Laura, I would guess.
You want to take that, Rob, or you want me to take it?
Yeah, let me take a stab and then you can add on. So in Sunrun, the answer is no, to my knowledge at least. And Sunrun doesn't really give a good breakdown of like kind of post-solar estimated remaining utility bill anyway. Aurora, I'm going to look right now as we're saying, I do think that is possible. It's something that I was just in Aurora's HQ last week, and this was a topic that came up. They are investing more resources into kind of building out some of their storage, tools. Mark mentioned earlier the addition of the kind of hourly page, which we might want to touch on again, but if it's not there, it will be coming soon. I'm pretty sure you can import on the energy consumption tab if you back out of sales mode on basically the project page. I do think you could import there, but I'd have to double check. If not, you can. Yeah, you can actually. Okay, so I'm here on the screen. You can't see my screen, I'm sure, but if you go to the energy consumption page and then you go to energy usage and you change your input method to interval data, there is a place where you can basically copy and paste your interval data. I haven't used it. I'm not sure how well it works, and it's probably kind of complicated to do it, but it looks like you can do that, which would make the daily usage kind of assumptions and estimates significantly more accurate.
Yep.
Just requested it there. All right. Hopefully you guys can see my screen now. Mark, can you give me a verbal?
Yep. You are live, sir.
All right, cool. So basically, you don't see this page, but if you're in a project, here, let me find a project. Where's the one I was just on? Let's maybe pick this guy. Okay, so if you're in sales mode, what you can do is you can get back and just click their name, and that'll bring you to the project overview page. Once you're here, you're going to navigate to energy consumption, which you can either do here on the left side or by clicking the pencil. Once you're in there, in energy usage, you can choose interval data. Once you click that, you can then click add interval data, and then this is where you can basically, copy from the CSV download from the utility and then paste it in here. You'll have to enter start date, interval, and then data delimiter, which is usually going to be comma. I know that's a little bit confusing, but we'd have to play around with this and see how good it works, but that is how you would get there.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate that. We're going to get to a couple more questions here in the chat. Thank you for your great questions on topic. We really do appreciate that. This question is from Robert, and it is, can you have a whole house and self-consumption in combination? Can you do both? Who wants to take that one?
I can take that. Yeah, all of the battery architectures we use when sold as backup. So you say whole home and self-consumption, but basically we're talking about using backup, whether it be partial or whole home. All of those batteries can be set for time of use, self-consumption, or backup only. Typically, that's a customer-facing option, and you can choose to daily cycle your backup system. Depend and set a reserve depending on what your kind of expectations for utility reliability are.
I'll add on to that actually. I'm going to share my screen again if that's okay.
Okay.
All right. So going back to Aurora, I'll make sure you guys know how to use this tool the best. So as you know, when you're selecting a battery, you're going to have two operating modes. You can have backup and self-consumption. The way Aurora works is part of kind of what Matt just said is, if you have a Tesla, you can still set it to cycle daily, or you can be, in other words, set the reserve so it maybe doesn't cycle daily. Otherwise, it would cycle daily. If you have a Tesla or a 5P in backup mode or available for backup, you're paying for backup, but they do expect, say you live in California and you also want to obviously use it for daily cycling and kind of self-consumption, and you want to show the economic kind of savings and benefit to the homeowner, what you could do is set this up in self-consumption mode and then just set your backup reserve. So say, for example, the customer says, okay, I want a battery, I want it to be able to back up, but I want to, use it in self-consumption. Basically what you could do is you could say, all right, so we're going to reserve 50% in the event of an outage. And that's how the battery would be set up. But the other 50% we're going to cycle daily and use it as a self-consumption battery, a non-backup battery. You can just use this toggle to do that, and it basically would show you the benefit of using the battery with that reserve. So it would only take the amount that you're using for non-backup. So, and this is that page that Mark was referencing earlier. This, I think, is a really helpful sales. So I know many of you have asked for this in the past, where it shows you more about kind of the daily, how this is going to look on a daily perspective. And this, I think, is a good tool to explain more about how the batteries work.
Thanks, Rob. We have a question from Arun, and that is, can we get today's PowerPoint? Today's PowerPoint we can attach to the outgoing email for the reminder and the recap. So if you do want a copy of that PowerPoint, we can send that out. We'll also have this webinar up in our video library and as part of the recap. So look for that later this afternoon, and we'll get that out to everyone. Thanks. Great question. We have a question from Alfredo, and this is for Matt. Do we know what the lifespan is of the batteries?
Yeah, I mean, I would refer back to the warranty information. Typically, the batteries have been had a 10-year warranty, as Max mentioned. Looks like the 5P, they've increased that to 15 years. So obviously, similar to solar panels, they're likely to operate at some capacity beyond that. But they're warranted to have a set capacity at that point, at that 10-year mark or the 15-year mark, whatever the warranty sets that as. But likely those batteries will continue to operate as the solar panels beyond their warranty date.
Appreciate that. We got another one for you from Michelle, and it's her last question. Just make sure I'm understanding correctly. The 5P and the 10T have different storage capacities, but the same continuous output?
Yeah, sure. I went through that pretty quickly. But if you're familiar with the Enphase architecture, all of the Enphase, like the microinverters get connected into strings that go behind 20 amp breakers. So if you did the math, that 3840, that correlates to the max that you can put on a 20 amp breaker. So the 10T battery was designed to be connected to a 20 amp breaker. The 5P battery is also intended to be connected to a 20 amp breaker. So if you sell, 10 kilowatt hours of capacity, that 10T is only going to have that single 20 amp breaker or 3840 watts. Two 5Ps would have two 20 amp breakers with 2 times that 3840 value.
Thanks, Matt. We have a question for Rob. It is what kind to be used with IQ8 microinverter panels?
All right, I'm gonna try to translate that one, Barry. So I'm assuming you're asking what kind of battery can be used with IQ8 microinverters. I guess is what you're asking. So again, Enphase inverters with Enphase batteries, SolarEdge inverters with SolarEdge batteries. Tesla can use either. So if you want an Enphase battery, you got to use Enphase inverters. If you have Enphase inverters, you can only use Enphase batteries. And same deal with SolarEdge.
Thanks, Rob. We have a question about battery installation. Several of my battery installations have been delayed due to a lack of electricians. Can you address how Freedom is going to ensure there's enough staffing to handle the battery installations?
I can take that. I'm probably closest to the operations and training teams here at Freedom. I will say that, in the past 6 months or so, we've seen an increase from about 4% nationwide to over 16% attachment rate of batteries, and in California, beyond 80% attachment rate for batteries. So fundamentally, we've kind of shifted our understanding of what a PV crew does. And the expectations that we've set with all of our operations branches is that eventually every crew in the United States is going to be installing PV plus storage. So obviously with the rapid growth in sales, we've had to kind of initiate a lot of training efforts. There's some regions that we've recognized that we've fallen behind a little bit, and now we've got kind of an all-out blitz for SoCal, bringing in all of our service techs and trainers and people from my team to go and make sure that those PV crews are set up for success, have the inventory they need, have the training they need. It's a little bit of a ramp. It takes a couple reps for the installation crews to get the fundamentals, but we are aggressively catching up to the influx in sales.
Thanks, Matt. We do have a question about partial and whole backup and the different types of batteries. Can you switch the Enphase and Tesla backup batteries between consumption mode and backup? And do you use an app or is it a physical switch? Who wants that one?
That's probably me as well. So I'm most familiar with the Tesla product because that's what we've been installing for backup. And that has an excellent customer interface where the customer can very easily switch between modes, change their backup reserve, amongst other things. So they have a great customer-facing app. I believe also that the Enphase also offers that same customer capabilities. The only one that doesn't is SolarEdge. Currently, we have to adjust the customer profiles for them. So typically, depending on where they're located, we'll set the best profile for that utility and use case, and they have to make adjustments. But I know that they're working on updating their app so that customer also has that capabilities.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We have a couple more minutes left with our panel. If you want to submit any more questions, we've kind of reached the end of our queue here. So if you do have any questions related to batteries or need clarification on some of the things that we've talked about, again, we can also field questions at our email address, producteducation@freedomforever.com. So we'll hold on for a couple more minutes, waiting for these final few questions to come into the Q&A. We do want to thank Rob, Brian, Max, Matt, thank you for being here today to answer these questions. And we will just wait a few more moments.
Mark, one of the ones that I've seen, I'm not sure if we've answered it yet. I don't think we have, but I think it's a good question. The question is, really, how long is my battery going to last? And I think that's a question that we get all the time. Did we answer that one yet? I don't think we have.
I think Matt had talked about referring to like the warranty information about like the lifespan of the batteries. But if you have something additional you want to add.
Yeah, no, sorry. I don't mean how long they're going to last in years. I mean when you're using them in a say the power goes out, how long are you going to be able to back up that battery in terms of hours? So I think that's an important one. Matt, we can tag team this one probably. So again, it's just like, I think a great parallel here is your cell phone battery or a tank of gas in your car. There's not one answer that really can be given because it depends on how you use it. If you don't use your cell phone and it's just sitting in your pocket, it's going to last a heck of a lot longer than if you're cranking on Angry Birds on your phone for 5 hours straight, or watching NFL Red Zone on Sunday, and you're using your battery in your phone a lot more. So it depends on how you use it. So the simple math that isn't always necessarily translatable to a customer in the home, but it's how much you're using divided by how much capacity do you have. So if you have, for example, a 10 kilowatt hour battery and you're using 2 kilowatts, that's going to last you 5 hours. It's pretty simple math. 10 divided by 2 is 5 hours. If you're have a 10 kilowatt hour battery and you're maxing out and you're using 5 kilowatts, that's going to last you 2 hours. So it's an equation of how much capacity is there and how much are you using, right? So on the 5 kilowatt hour Enphase battery, that's why we're a little bit more concerned about with larger systems having 2, is because if you have a larger solar system, the obvious assumption is that you need a larger solar system because you are using more things in your house. And if that is the case, you're probably not going to be happy with just a 5 kilowatt hour battery, because you're probably going to use that up in an hour or an hour and a half maybe. So hopefully that makes sense. I think that is a very relevant question. That's a question that you're going to get a lot from customers. And again, it depends on how you use it, but it's simply kilowatt hours over kilowatts. It's going to give you your backup duration in hours.